We're going to get into a little bit of coloring today. I'm going to talk about a little bit about color theory with you a little bit, using limited supply of colors, just in case you guys only have so many in your repertoire of your supplies, because you want to think about that as a colorist for now. If you only have so many colored pencils, so many markers. Rita's mine for the third. Oh, Evie, well, sometimes you have to do that, Evie, unfortunately. You know what? If you're using traditional media too, guys, don't forget about the photocopier. You can photocopy your line art in the case that you got to go back and work on it again with your traditional media, and that way you have a copy of that, you know. So try to look ahead, a little far ahead, when you get to traditional media like this, because yeah, sometimes you can't turn back. It's kind of unforgiving once you put certain things down. You guys will see what I get into with that as well today. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about color, and then we'll go into a little bit of lettering if we have time. But I'm gonna make color the main focus, because I think I spoke a lot about bubbles and word balloons, but I'll go to a little bit more specifics with that before we go today too. So a lot to cram in an hour, but we'll make the best of it. And I'll, of course, give you guys some of my my thoughts on color theory and how to look at it with what you have, okay? So let me get my camera here situated. Okay. Yes, my marker and written table here. Okay, so let me just get simple paper out here. Okay, so a couple of things to think about as we approach color. Two things that we're going to look at in particular with color and coloring. Color is going to work with two different things. We're going to work with value here, which you're going to find out includes temperature, and that's hot or cold. Okay, and then we're going to get into texture as well here a little bit, because if we have a limited supply of colored pencils and markers, which I have here right in front of me, which I'll get into, basically we can really make our tools go a longer way with thinking about how to apply texture or even pattern within our texture, because pattern in comics, there's a lot of it that you can utilize. So I want you to think about these two main ones, but these parts of these, okay? And we're going to get into that right now. So what I'm talking about with value in terms of temperature and hot and cold values. Well, when we look at something that's definitely hot versus cold, we can really tell by just placing them sometimes next to each other without using the media, right? We can look at how the manufacturer has made the color on the actual items, right? So if I put two colors next to each other and I have one that's now, surely it's popping out next to this one. If I put another cold one on the other side of that, it's going to do the same thing, right? It's still popping out that value. How do I make sure? I do a thing called sandwiching, guys. I take my pencil and I'll do a couple strokes of a nice, even, basically thick line, and I'll begin to put other color values beside that, or even sandwiched between two of the same values, just to make sure I'm going to have the contrast I have there. Now you can try this with other values. Take the same value, even the hottest color, and just see how hot it can be up against other cold values. Now I'm just using colored pencils here, But here I go with this mustard yellow, and now I'm getting a nice contrast. What if I sandwich that? Wow, look what pops out now. The cool value is winning a little bit more here, isn't it now? So this one's coming back. Even though that I have a hotter temperature on this exterior color. So that's why it kind of helps to do this sandwich method to see your color values and the differences between those values. So don't, I guess what I'm saying is that these colors on the printed tool can fool you into the relationship of the colors. So try the sandwich method, guys, and take varying degrees of pencils and see the temperatures. If I'm going to, let's say, these two, okay, I kind of have maybe an even temperature between them right now. But what happens if I sandwich those values? So here I go. I'm going to make my gray. I'm going to put my green in. And then I'm going to do my gray again. Okay, now, oh, wow, this is really popping out. But what happens if I sandwich my gray between two greens? Now the greens are really popping out. So there's something with also how much you're using of the value too, but look at just the relationship between two if you have to, okay? You're looking at the temperature, the difference of the color. Now, this is a part of the value into the tool, but so is mixed media. So if I go to a marker, let's say, like this sky blue marker, and I place a color value in with this, I do a one line, and let's see what my green does against it. Okay, if I sandwich it, okay, they're all kind of playing evenly. This is pretty even values. I'm not getting too much pop. I'm looking at everything pretty evenly here. Now, what happens with a marker versus the colored pencil? You just have a different application, right? You have a darker value altogether with a marker per se to how you use a colored pencil, because I can easily make this colored pencil much lighter in value against that marker. And now look what happens. Now we have a really stark contrast between the marker and the color pencil. So what am I getting at with this? Well, if you guys want to approach mixed media, let's say this is a drawing I did for a roller skating magazine a little while ago. I'm going to use it as my reference because this is fully done and my comic strip isn't there yet. And I really just wanted to kind of experiment on something with you guys. So I felt like this has enough foreground, midground, and background for us to kind of look at things. Now, here's what my thought is with this, okay? And this is going to go into texture and pattern here in a second. But think about which you want to do. You want to put marker as a value in for contrast. Maybe you want to apply that all then on a character who's in your foreground, right? And then your background, you're going to color in with colored pencil, because what you're going to get then is an automatic contrast. You're going to make your character pop more if we apply more marker than we would to the background, right? But certainly if I add marker to my character here and I add it to my background, what I'm starting to do then is then I'm going to be sharing basically the importance of the color values between my foreground and background. So if we have a limited palette with limited tools, you might want to consider to be paring down those values. What do I mean by paring down? Well, here's an all colored pencil drawing. And as you might see here, I have left white values in some of my character here, and basically in all of my elements. Because what I'm putting down is basically I'm suggesting that color value enough to where I'm letting the white be these ultra highlights of the drawing. So I'm not even coloring in things fully here, I'm just giving everything the same amount of value, and then obviously I'm giving what I can enough contrast in its foreground. But as you can see, I'm not even going in and basically hard lining. Sorry, that's getting a little, there we go. I'm not really hard lining those lines and or putting the colors exactly next to the line art all the time. I'm letting there be a highlighted edge on some of these drawings, right? And on these characters' features. And this is giving me enough contrast away from everything else to compete. So is this a kind of a form of texturing? No, this is more of a form of application, applying how I'm applying my pencil down, my colored pencil, evenly across the drawing. Now, what I'm going to, with the marker though, I'm saying that we should, and I think you should, guess to yourself, okay, I think I'm going to put all of my character foregrounds in more markers to get basically a stronger contrast against my backgrounds of colored pencil, or vice versa. Okay, you're going to get contrast out of them just by doing that in itself. So what about the combination? Okay, what does that do? Let's talk about that. Let's say if I'm using, and I have the opportunity to use maybe a value of pencil next to a value of marker that are pretty close to each other. Well, what would be a good way to use these? Well, if I can make a suggestion, let's just say I'm coloring my character's shirt here. What I would do with my marker, I would take my marker, and what I'm going to think about is doing all of my, basically my shadowed edges and my crease works with a marker value. So I'm going to go in with my marker, and I'm just going to add a thickness to my shadowing. I'm going to extend that into some of my other values of my line. But I'm only doing this on the areas underneath the arms because this is where I'm not getting any light, right? Lack of light, then I'm going to go to a highlight. Watch. So I put my marker in on those parts. Now I can take my colored pencil and extend off of my marker. And what I'm going to do, and I'm going to try to fan out my pencil enough to where I'm starting to get to a nice highlighted edge on my arm. But the marker is nice because it's still giving me that nice line art with it, and it's letting me blend a little bit of my colored pencil in here. But I'm leaving that white highlighted edge. Now, do these have to be totally similar in color like I just picked with these two? No, you guys could have, we're going to move on, and I'm going to mix up values and see how this still works with this method. So put the shadowing in with your marker, and then take your colored pencil and extend that out. Give yourself some highlighted edges. Now, what would I do for my collar? This is all part of the same shirt. Well, I'm getting a little bit of an undercarriage here with some shadow underneath my lapel. So I'm going to put that in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the edge here of my vest comes down, because already my line art has indicated that I have a shadow there. And how do I know? It's thicker before it gets thinner, right? So this is why, and this is how, as you guys can see, how these values of line are changing its thickness to the shadow and to the form. That's going to help indicate for the colorist, who's also you in this instance, would look at that line as an importance to show the shadow, right? So I'm going in and placing that shadow on all of the lines. I've kind of indicated that. I'm going to have a little bit down here towards his belt line. Basically, I just gave it enough there. And maybe if I want to, I can, I'll extend it a little bit over here on his collar. But just enough. And now I'm going to go in with my colored pencil just to fan that out, and I'm leaving a little bit of a white highlight again, guys, on the edges, because I'm suggesting that light is hitting the value of this shirt and giving me that highlight. Okay, so there's my shirt. Now going into mixing these two, okay? Let's say, now I wouldn't go too extreme. I wouldn't say go from an orange to a blue necessarily. I would try to stay in your families. That's the only kind of restriction of this, meaning if you're in oranges, you're going to go into blues. If you're in blues, you're going to go into greens, right? If you're in reds, you're going to go into pinks. So we're adding either yellow or white values those. So if you have a few, go and see what kind of oranges and yellows that you have compared to your orange. And what you want to do is say, okay, if this is my shadow, then I want to basically allow that to breathe off of it. Well, what do these look like next to each other? Let's sandwich them, right? Wow, oh my gosh. That's a lot more red than I thought. Because, I mean, it looks pretty burnt umber on here. It's actually called sanguine. So if I take that and put this orange next to it, wow. Okay, not much difference in value there. What if I put this orange? That'd be kind of neat. I'm going to put more. Sometimes if you have a flat edge, it'll be nice to just put that. Ooh, that looks like mine's running out a little bit on my fat edge, but try that. See what this goldenrod kind of color looks like. Ooh, that's nice. Or even this. What's this one? This is golden yellow. Okay. Yeah, just a little difference between the two of them. How does this look? Let's try it. Let's try this sanguine and my golden yellow. And I'm going to put that on my pants. I'm going to go to my thin line. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, I'm looking at my thicker lines that are saying where my shadow is, right? So obviously underneath my pants here, I can extend that. If you want, you can curl in some of that value if you want to on something that's an organic kind of shape. But I'm following all of my already registered shadow lines. And where it breaks, I may not add it on this little lip. This is going to be a little highlighted lip. It's just what the pants are doing because he bent his leg there. So again, going about a little bit of study of, this would be drapery, that would be called. So if you guys want to look up online, looking up drapery and how drapery falls, you can see how that works. So again, did all my shadows. I'm leaving off where I think is going to be a highlight, right? I'm already seeing this one, that's for sure. In the middle of my leg here is going to have a highlight. But what I'm going to do is take my colored pencil now in a different value, and I'm going to extend that out. And I'm looking to now merge the values in so I have a white highlight on my pants here. I'm just extending this out. And I'm leaving white, right? That's kind of the power of this, is because it's simplifying how much our eyes need to see to register the value of color being distributed. Extending off those lines, and I'm just fanning them nicely, giving it even pressure. All right, now so I have some pretty cool pants. Now, here's just a little texture overlay I'm seeing on this. This could be fun. I can add a really nice pattern a little bit on this in another value. Let's see. What will look good on that? Maybe if I use a marker even, I'll get the most contrast. So let's see. Here's a Spanish orange. If I use it here, oh, it's pretty strong. And it's very hot colored. It may not look very hot on your screen, but now here's what I would suggest with doing pattern. If you're going to use pattern, you have to be very technical about your placement of pattern. Some of you might have seen what are called zipatone dots, which are basically dot patterns that actually show value. But the only way they work is if you distribute the dots in the same distancing and relationship to each other in order to basically see a value. It's something our eyes do with pattern, is the relationship of all of the texture and its relationship to itself that'll give that value. Now, do these have to be O's? No, these can be X's. But what I'm doing is I'm keeping my idea of what my distancing of my X's are to my other ones. So if I'm placing them in these X's in kind of a crisscross, I have to keep this pattern up to make it look like an even value. So how would that work on my pants? Now that I've put some colored pencil in, I got some reds for my darks, and now I'm going to go in and on my whites in particular, we're going to really see this, but hopefully on some of my colored pencil we will too. But this is what I would do if I were you, is I would approach it, like I said, go into a texture very evenly. You almost kind of want to be robotic about it. But look at the way, if you're keeping a nice even line too, this helps give you some nice overlay. Now, could my circles be smaller? Sure. Yeah, definitely. Could they be X's? Yeah, they can be X's. They can be bigger O's if you guys want. But look what I'm doing. I'm keeping my uniform relationship going on no matter what's getting in my way of showing my texture. Because there's something about how our eyes register the value when they're all next to each other in this same uniform relationship. I'm going to do it again on my other pants. Try this out, guys. It's a really fun way to get a cool comic texture and form. And you know, if you really want to hammer it home that you're doing comics, this is kind of a fun way to bring about that that total visualization. And again, I'm only using 3 different markers for this. I could easily have interchanged. I could use the Spanish orange on my darks, and I could be doing these dots with my red, right? It kind of you have to play with the relationship of the values is what I'm saying. That's why this sandwiching technique is really great, because you're just looking at the relationships before you put them on where they really matter, right? Because like Evie was saying, she had to go back and do another version. And well, that's just, that's just par for the course, really. That's going to happen. But as you get, more experience with this, the less and less you'll have to do that. especially if you're, you're running something that is starting to see your values, right, before you put them down. If I show my motivation for my fold out, yeah, of course. We're definitely going to get to sharing. I just want to run a little bit here. Go ahead, Tater. What do you have for us? This is a motivation piece, you said? Oh, this is your storyboard. Is that your storyboard? Yes. Yeah, there's no audio, Tater. Okay. So here's a little pattern, color overlay. Let's see if Tater's audio is coming in. We'd love to hear from you, Tater, when you're ready. Let's see. Let's talk about some more. Oh, there we go.
I could have dropped my croissant.
You did a little voiceover? Where'd you get all of that? From the actual clip?
It's from a Vine. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's super cool. It's awesome. It really makes you look at timing, doesn't it, when you have a video form like that? Because then you're really seeing your relationships of forcing your viewer to look at basically how that time is working out between the still drawings. That's really cool. I'm going to be using now, let's see, a nice violet purple here. So let's see what this gives us. It's nice, pretty deep. Let's see, what's that look like against my, well, let's see, let's use one of these. This is a willow green. Let's see, just, ooh, okay. If I sandwich it, all right, that's pretty nice and interesting. That could look interesting. Yeah, I'm going to try something. Like I did here with our foreground character with the pants, I'm going to put in, let's see with my, if I put purple in my stripes and I put my whole vest in my marker. Let's see what that does for contrast. Give my nice value on my stripes. Because I sandwiched this up and it looks really good. I really like the way they look together. And again, I think our marker, because of its value alone and the way it applies its color to my paper, I should get a nice contrast between the two. And now this is not the case where I'm doing my ultra highlighting. I'm looking for just value of color to give us automatic contrast, right? So you can kind of pick and choose if you how much of what you want to draw also has the white ultra highlight, because it could really just be full renderings like I'm doing with the vest here. I'm completely coloring in my vest instead of giving my highlight. But look how much my purple now is sitting back. So that's nice. And take a look, if as I didn't apply it all the way, I have a nice even highlight even of off of the colored pencil. So the colored pencil's automatic texture start to have a contrast against the marker no matter what. It's just that you have to look at the temperature to see how they're relating to each other. Because that's the thing, the color doesn't have its truest value until it's up against the other colors it's going to be grouped with, right? That's why sandwiching is good, because at least gives us an idea of how they're going to live together beyond what we can see on the printed device, right, guys? So don't trust your printed color necessarily on your pens and your markers until you actually apply them to the paper you're using. Because even the paper, this is a very smooth paper, even the paper will lead to a texture application. Does that make sense? Because if I have this has a heavy grain, or it has a lot of teeth on it, which is bumpy, that bumpiness is going to do something else to my marker, and it's going to do something else to my colored pencil. So look at that relationship and make sure you're doing your tests on the same paper as you're doing the final drawing, because that way you're working to the exact application, right? You're getting that same value. Going back with pattern a little bit, what if I say, okay, and a part of this is with color too, guys, is the relationship between the foreground elements and your background with color. What parts of the color in my character am I going to put in the background to allow my eye to go and wander and to point at it? Because that's how you want to think about some of your layouts and your drawings. It's going to be a feast of the eyes that also takes the viewer around the image, right? So if I'm thinking about the rhythm of how I want my character to see something, or my viewer to see something, then I want to think about what colors am I going to use in my background, and how am I going to use them. So I just see this green. I really like it. It plays really nice. It works really good. So make sure the marker you're using is also working good to try something like this, okay? I'm going to do, again, my dot pattern, but I'm not going to put in my colored pencil first. I'm going to put just my dot pattern along my tree line here. And let's just see what it looks like, okay? Now, again, uniformity is key on this. So make sure if you are starting that you're staying in a uniform construction of the relationship between all of the lines. So if I'm going totally horizontal here in how I'm putting in this color, I'm staying that way the whole way until I meet something that I can't put that value in, right? Now again, these could be X's too. These could be letters. These patterns. But I'm just going to do circles because it's pretty immediate, and I think it shows everything it needs to show with you guys. Can we just appreciate Mr. Mike's patience to draw all those dots that look exactly the same? So thank you so much. Here's another thing you guys can think about. So look at this relationship. I'm kind of close here, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to gradually pull and change the relationship of my dots as I come down. Because what I'm going to give now is what's called a gradient, kind of. You guys might have used that tool in Photoshop. I'm getting further and further away from each other as I come down here. You guys can decide how fast that goes and how fast that comes, because basically you can also dissipate it down to whiteness. And you can even start to make them even smaller in the dissipation. You've all seen this pattern, I'm sure, used on some of your clothing, maybe on a pair of shoes. This kind of comes from comics, guys. This is called zip-a-tone. Zip-a-tone. tone. It's the idea of putting, you know, dot structures to make a gradient of value. So now where I put it here, I'm going to do the same thing on this tree line. I'll do that fairly quickly here because we're running out of time. Again, now I'm going all the way across, right? Keeping it so uniform, because if I break the uniformity, guys, if I make this be all wavy, it might start to get distracting. So make sure when you're doing this, you're keeping an either perfectly vertical or perfectly horizontal play into the application. There's so much to comics, isn't there? A lot to think about, a lot to consider, especially if you're going to be a cartoonist and you're going to want to write and illustrate your own works. Well, there's a lot of thought involved, but that's what makes it fun. It's funny about the fold-out comics because something minor happens. Let me see. Didn't read all that. Then it all unfolds. Right, I'll leave. Yeah, well, I think you're right. It's definitely that. It's definitely how you're getting the information in the fold-out that makes the piece really work. It's all about time, guys. That's what comics are. You're controlling time and how much you're giving your viewer into your story. Okay, so where I'm getting at with this, I'm going to just move ahead a little bit, is try a marker pattern, guys, right? Like this, and then grab your colored pencil, and that could be, you know, again, another different value even. Let's say I can add a yellow maybe to this now, just to see what this does as an overlay. And I'm going to treat it the same way, but I'm going to also be a little loose on how much I'm putting down on this. I might leave a little bit of highlighted white, but I'm going to go over that nice and evenly until I find whiteness maybe again. Can I fill it all the way yellow? Sure. But look how cool that looks, right? Put a marker pattern down, put a colored pencil pattern down, but just make sure you're uniform the value of application on that. So that's giving me contrast, right? Now, if I have something so textured contrast, I might want to think then that other shapes may not have that contrast, right? So say for my boot here, I have a little bit of texturing going on just to give my wood form here. So again, I'm going to decide, okay, do I have a brown marker I can use? Yeah, how about this? Terracotta. Yeah, that's got like a little orange. So again, I'm going to put putting my texture down, just going over all the lines that I already indicated even with black line. And then like I did with my character's pants, I'm going to think about maybe accentuating all of my existing black lines that are showing a shadow. For instance, underneath my roof here. I'm going to follow a little bit of that boot. Anywhere that I've already begun to give a little indication of shadow. And what's great about this method too, guys, I'm not using a lot of marker because markers are expensive, right? Especially if you have really good ones. So this kind of also allows you to take your tools a far way. And that's what you want. Less trips to the art store, right? Make your items last a little longer. I'm accenting all of my blacks. Now I can think about further shadow use. Maybe underneath my portholes here, I have a little bit more. You can put shadow. Because that's the other part about the marker is it's such a pure value that when you pair it up with a colored pencil, now I'm going to go over top of this terracotta. And yeah, I'm going to use this orange now. So if I combine it, now if I'm going to work off of so I'm going to go over them a little bit more with my colored pencil, why not? And now I'm going to think about my highlighted edge on my shoe. I know my light is coming down. So I'm going to follow the form a little bit, right? And now I'm going to work off of the form and work to merge my pencil to my marker. And now I have, basically I have my darks and I have my midtone, and now I'm going to get my highlight because I'm going to leave parts of the color in white. Sometimes it's going to merge, sometimes it's not, right? But this is where the job of the penciler and the inker before this, maybe it's you, is already doing a lot of the hard work. Because now as a colorist, I can already see where my mind was with thinking where the color is. So all the line art and all the color, they have to work hand in hand. It's just dependent on how far you guys want to take those colors and those values. But that's an interesting relationship, right? That burnt brown, and I'm just with this is an orange chrome. So this is a pretty hot orange, but off of this red, it gets a little bit neutralized off of my terracotta. So there we go. And if I want, I can fan this a little bit more, but I still want a little bit of that highlight going on because that boot is taking a lot of in. Oh, look what I forgot underneath the little awning here. Sometimes the magic doesn't happen until you're putting that really good stark shadow in there firsthand. And that way you can build off of mid-tone. Pretty cool, huh? It's coming. Now, look at the relationship now. I mean, it's still working. This is still popping out against my pattern, but it's got a nice marriage to it too, because I'm still using the same density of values from one to the other, which is so important. All right, we have 15 minutes left. I just want to go over some rules of lettering for you guys so that you have all of the know-how. And I hope that this method of finding color relationships is something you guys can keep looking at. Again, hot and cold values is what we're looking at with color, right? How do things pop? How do we accent our already line work that we already put in? How do they work together? What can we hold back on just to give us highlighting, right? Instead of coloring it in all the way, think about just how much you need, right? And to get the highlight. Now doing our lettering. This is an interesting lettering. I'm even an example to start with because this kind of breaks the rules in comics when you take lettering outside the bubble. But if it's done right, it could look nice. It's done also for kind of an effect as well. This was a digitally colored drawing, so this would pop out a lot more on my digital color display. But this is not really what I'm going to talk about right now. I'm actually going to talk about the relationship inside the bubble, and I want you guys to look at. So let me get some pencil here. All right, so a couple of rules. when you're putting in your bubbles, you want to look at a couple of things. You want to think about a tiered structure of bubble of your words that pretty much always are going to fall into basically a triangle or even a prism, because essentially when the way you put in the words inside of that bubble, they're going to live the best way of clarity inside your bubble form. I'm just going to give this a form here. But you need to imagine this as a shape. But when you're placing in your text, what you're going to do is you're going to evenly space your triangle form. You can give it nice line, nice even light lines. And then now what you want to do is you want to plan that this is going to fit into all of your tiering of your words. Now what's good about your triangle form here is I'm giving a little bit of excess around the edge here. Why are the words going to jail? Prism. Oh, prison, you thought. No, prism. Yeah, prism. Yeah. So what you're looking at, once you place your words in, let's just make up a sentence here. Hey, Jim, did you see that rabbit? Okay, so if I'm looking at this, then I'm looking at my tiering, and what I want to do is I want to make this structure so that it's going to go from a thin line of length, not long, to a thicker, to a thin again, right? That way it fits in this prism enough, it's giving the whole bubble enough shape around it. So my Hey Jim is going to go up on my second tier here. That's going to get the comma. Did you see is going to fit my middle. And that way you know how to, because once you know it's on that line, then you know how to distribute it underneath the already given text, right? And I know that did you see on a line is a lot longer than that rabbit, or at least considerably longer, so that when I put that rabbit underneath here, then I'm still getting that tiered form. Now, what you might also notice is that you planned a little bit too big for your bubble, and that's all right. Just what you do now is looking at your prism, you're going to bring your bubble in closer to the prism, especially if everything fits into the prism enough, and you can resize your oval of your bubble now to the text that you placed in. Now, a couple other things. Let's say if I'm going to letter on an edge, like this is the corner of my paper right here. Let's just say my drawing's here, and this is my edge of my frame of my balloon, okay? Well, consider that if you were going to cut this top off of your bubble, that you're going to have the same space between your text from here to that point as you would from the text here to your balloon, because you want it to look like it's still fitting within the circle, but the excess you're going to take off is still evenly framing the text. You gotta leave a lot of room around this, guys. You want your text to breathe. You want someone to be able to read this so easily, okay? So part of that is setting those lines nice and even on within a pyramid and giving yourself enough bubble of living around that. So we have a nice tier going on with inside the bubble. And you're looking at how the sentence reads this, because you're sending text down. Are you allowing your reader to read it the best way with what's on the given line, right? I distribute this on the first line, I distributed this on the second, and I distributed on that on the third. Now, if I had put, did you see that? And then I put rabbit at the bottom, would that have read better than me putting, did you see that rabbit? Okay, so there's a relationship of the tiers of each of your text, of your sentence in itself. Okay, so as you write and learn to fit this, think about that. Think about how your reader is reading it. Are they getting the right line on each one of the tiers of your font, of your bubble, of every bubble? Okay? Sense? Hope you guys are getting something out of this. Lettering is a very, what you would assume to be one of the easiest parts of making comics. It's actually one of the hardest. It's especially to do it really well, but it takes time like anything else. What was that? I was getting someone. Anybody have any questions on this? Now, just we have about 6 minutes. I just want to tackle a few other things with bubbles and font and lettering. Think about how you're marrying the sentence that you write as well, because what happens there is when you have words and basically sentences that are associated to each other, you might want to have them with different relationships. Meaning, if I'm talking about, hey, hey Jim, did you see that rabbit? And maybe if I wanted my character to add something else to that question, like, he was crazy, huh? So it's like 2 questions asked. Okay, so I would think then in that bubble, because of how he's adding another sentence on it, that relationship would be closer to this sentence. Therefore, I might have my bubbles merge in a form like so. And if, let's just say I have a answer back from Jim, well, Jim's going to have his own bubble. Another indicator of what you guys want to watch out for is your relationships from your fin to your heads of your characters. You never want the fin going into the face. You don't ever have to put it into the mouth. You want to keep it out and just at least point it enough to indicate where that fin is leading to and who's speaking. Now let's just say this is Al. If Al is saying this to Jim and Jim has a quick maybe talk back, he's saying, yeah, so crazy. I'm just doing this quick. Well, I got to consider maybe Al talks back here. Well, would this need to connect to this before giving Al a fin? No, not necessarily. Maybe it would need that if these bubbles were higher above my drawing to give then the space enough flow and enough connection to who's talking. But since the relationship of my bubble to my character is this intimate and this close, I can break off of that first tiers of bubbles and dialogue for a third one that would live on its own, because I can simply now put the fin to my character. Does that make sense? So if this was high up, I might want to connect all these to get it down to my source. So look at fins as a connector around other dialogue, and it's also an indicator of who's talking, right? And how much space we have to travel. Because if this was higher, again, I might use that connector. But since it's down here and the relationship is like so, I don't need to make a connecting fin. I can go right to him and make it all separate in itself. And my rules are top to bottom, left to right, right? That's my same rule that applied to every one of the comic jobs that we did. I think that's really mostly what I can talk about it. Do I have any questions from you guys about any of this? Oh, we have a few minutes here. Is this helpful? That's the question. Did everybody get something out of that? Wanted to get your feedback. I know, a lot to think about, but that's comics. It has, that's why 5 people do the job of a comic book and a comic strip typically. But as cartoonists who write and illustrate, you guys are going to need to think about how to look ahead and craft it very evenly, and so that the sequentialness of the comic works and has its own basically application that stands on its own. I'll share some work before I go. This is what I'm working on right now. These are mid-century motels I'm illustrating. I stayed in a lot of these when I was a kid. I start them in very light pencil, and I'm going in with very tiny, tiny micron pens. So doing a little work like that, and I'm doing some panels that are in circular forms, and this is on a matrix, and I'm using a little bit of marker on those as well for application. So again, merging the traditional forms to give yourself a more appealing application, right? Make your artwork pop out with contrast and pop out with interest, right, for people. So, all right, guys, I hope you got a lot out of all of this. I hope you can finish your comic strip and your fold-outs with what you know now. Happy holidays, and I hope everything is awesome into the new year for all of you. It's been such a pleasure.
Bye. Happy holidays. Thanks, Mike.
Bye.
Such a pleasure. Bye, guys. Bye, Evie. Bye, Laura.
Bye. Happy holidays, everyone.
Bye, Carrot. Bye, Tater.